Kullervo and the word infinity might as well be one in the same, because he is easily the Warframe capable of doing the most damage possible with pretty much zero effort. There is just something about combining quadratically scaling damage with some of Warframe's most powerful weapons and arcanes to get damage numbers that are so ridiculously high that makes Kullervo one of my all-time favorites. And with the release of his new Apostate skin, I didn't want to keep these builds from y'all any longer. Contrary to what one might expect from a Kullervo video though, of the two setups that I have, only one is melee oriented, the other a sniper setup, which probably confuses you, but trust me, he's honestly a better sniper frame than Cyto9, which is saying something. Regardless, the basis of the insanity today lies not in Wrathful Advance, but rather in his third ability, Collective Curse. Collective Curse has been the source of many broken things since his release back in 7 Crimes, for a good reason. It's broken. Honestly, this might be the best ability in the game. To give a simple overview before really getting into the niche mechanics, at the cost of 75 energy, Kullervo will send forth a wave of energy in a 65-degree cone over a base range of 25 meters. While the former of those two stats cannot be augmented with range due to the nature of how cones work, obviously the angle will increase as it continues forward. The wave passing through enemies will stagger them briefly while subsequently chaining them together, which is visually represented by literal chains. The linking of enemies is loosely based on line of sight, functioning similarly to Pillage, where the wave will go through walls, but you do have to see enemies for even just a fraction of a second during the wave's lifespan to actually chain them, but just being proactive in your movement will really negate this being an issue. I wouldn't really worry about it. What is most important here though, is that any weapon or ability damage dealt by Kullervo and only Kullervo to any cursed enemy will spread that to all other cursed enemies at 50% of the initial damage instance, 100% being achievable with 200% strength, which for all further discussions I'm just going to assume you have. It's already quite easy to see why this is so powerful. High damage in Warframe is quite easy to achieve, thus the only way to really make a difference is to kill more enemies in a shorter amount of time than individually attacking all of them would take, and Collective Curse allows just that. Consider melees outside of melee influence. They are not massive AoE machines, but because hitting one cursed enemy replicates damage across possibly an entire tile set, it's as if you struck them all simultaneously. And say you strike 2 of them at once? Well, that's where things get a little ridiculous, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The damage spread by Curse is not just a replication of your initial hit exactly. Rather, it is converted into either true damage or shield drain damage depending on whether the initial target's health or shields were damaged. Shield drain damage has no modifier against these two defensive layers, positive or negative, and will not bypass any sort of damage reduction, so it's kind of but true damage is wildly overpowered. Like shield drain, it also has no damage modifier against any faction, but it actually will ignore armor's damage reduction when applied to enemies, meaning a level 185 heavy gunner like this goes from having 2.6 million HP to just 261,000, allowing for a far easier kill. As said before, it's really easy to see why this is so broken, but hitting multiple chained enemies is really where things start to break because of quadratic scaling. Let's say you hit one enemy out of 20 total for 100 damage. For simplicity's sake, we will say they all have no armor. That would result in all of them taking 100 damage, but hitting 5 enemies would make them all take 500 damage because, well, math. Let's have N define the number of enemies linked, H define the number of enemies hit, and D the damage dealt to each of the H enemies. This results in the equation H times D times N if looking for the total damage dealt to the entire group, and a more complex equation in the case-by-case basis, depending on if they were hit initially or only by the ability. Factoring in the aforementioned numbers for total damage gives us 5 times 100 times 20 for 10,000 total damage, each enemy taking 500 individually. So yeah, quadratic scaling absolutely breaks damage in Warframe and is absurdly strong. But what is best to pair with it? Well, there are 2 routes you can take with this one. Make use of quadratic scaling to hit most enemies decently hard to kill them all, or hit one enemy so incredibly hard the rest will die too. Both work quite well, and I do have a very powerful option for both, so you tell me which one you want. Yeah, I thought y'all would choose the one with the higher numbers. Oh well, quadratic scaling, you can wait. Not that it should, it's honestly Whatever. Y'all know this is broken. As the melee-oriented setup, clearly we need a good melee, and Harmony is by far the best option on Kullervo, no doubt in my mind. Harmony is one of Jade's 3 signature weapons, and as a one-handed scythe is a decent melee, but nobody uses this one to spam light attacks. Rather, it is one of the best heavy attack weapons in the game due to its hidden passive that is essentially Expedite Suffering. This ability will take any active slash or toxin statuses on enemies within its range and immediately condense all the damage that they would do over their 6-second lifespan into a singular damage instance. For example, 5 procs on an enemy that would all deal 1000 damage over 6 seconds would turn into an immediate hit of 5000 damage. Which is obviously really good, and Harmony's heavy attacks have this effect built in for free. And seeing as the heavy attack of Fading Hope has a forced slash proc with a 600% damage multiplier on both swings, nothing really lives through this. But it gets even better when you introduce melee afflictions. This is the best melee arcane for pure damage. Sure, Influence destroys it in KPM, but if you want to deal as much damage as possible to one enemy, this is your arcane, especially on Harmony. Affliction states that enemies affected by status effects gain 6 additional stacks when they're knocked down or flung by melee attacks, so what does that mean? Well, lucky for you, Professor Fortnite Guy is here to explain to you in totality just how broken this arcane is.
Hi, I'm Professor Fortnite Guy, and I'm going to one of the best colleges in the United States, so you should trust me. Afflictions has some very harsh triggering conditions that are well outlined in the wiki, but for the purposes of our discussion, Harmony's heavy attack does ragdoll enemies, thus making it applicable here. This means that on heavy attack, 6 stacks of any existing statuses, or even the ones applied on the attack that triggers afflictions, will be added, resulting in 7 total slash procs, the damage being calculated in 4 parts. Firstly, the modded base damage, or MBD, of each proc is determined, which in Slash's case is the weapon's base damage with additions like primed pressure point, any faction damage, elementalist, and any other additional multipliers you might have. Note that neither elemental or physical damage mods benefit Slash. After that, sum the damage of all MBDs and divide it by the number of status procs to get your average Slash proc damage, and then multiply it by any melee faction bonuses, which will give you the initial hit's damage. But Slash is a DOT. Most of its damage lies in the ticks over its 6-second lifespan, whose damage is defined by the previous number times the status effect multiplier, which for Slash is 0.3, times the faction and status damage bonuses again. All in all, melee afflictions is fantastic for sights, but now take this number and remember that it will be dealt immediately due to Harmony's Expedite Suffering passive, and you'll realize that you've got one hell of a broken weapon here. Okay, that's all from me. Homework will be posted in Blackboard and be due next class. Until then, stay skibbity. Professor Fortnite out.
Thank you, Professor. What I will add to this is that take all of that and remember that Collective Curse is going to redistribute it to any enemy as true damage. It kind of just isn't fair. The build on Harmony looks as shown. It might appear a little unorthodox, but let me explain. Condition Overload will get us a hell of a lot more base damage if we have lots of statuses on enemies, our companion Diriga being the source of them, but I'll get to it after. Galvanized Reflex is a really great mod for this build due to our focus on heavies. Adding 50% heavy efficiency and up to 80 initial combo, it provides us with an easy 4 times damage multiplier to our heavy attacks just for getting kills, and the efficiency actually adds with Kullervo's passive 75% up to the cap of 90%, so that even if we heavy attack at 12x, you only lose 10% of your combo. Steel gives more critical chance and crit damage, same as Amalgam Organ Shatter, which also stacks more heavy windup speed that Kullervo's passive, again, will add to. Primed Reach is just more quality of life so we don't have to be in enemies' faces to hit them, and Berserker Fury has a niche application by speeding up the recovery animation after heavy attacking, which means we can spam them quicker. Elementalist for obvious reasons, even more heavy windup speed being appreciated. Lasting Sting though, why would anyone ever want to use this mod? Well, this might actually be the only place you'd ever want to. While statuses like Corrosive or Viral would simply last longer with this mod, The nature of DOT statuses means that the longer they last, the more damage they will deal, but typically you don't want to wait out an entire slash proc. Yet as you know, Harmony is going to condense them down into one instance anyways, so increasing the number of ticks stored from 6 to 12 is a massive damage double. The lack of Blood Rush or anything similar is because over on Kullervo, Wrathful Advance gives us all the crit chance we need, your power strength contributing 2% per single percent of its own, which means that our value of 214, we have over 400% more critical chance on Harmony. Otherwise, this is a pretty standard Kullervo build to spam Collective Curse. He doesn't have any dump stats per se, because you need duration for Wrathful, range for Recompense and Curse, and efficiency to spam, and strength because it's strength. Ready Steel in the Aura is just another tier of initial combo on Harmony, bringing us to 6x. Our Helmet of Roar also serves as just our faction damage bonus to compensate for not having space on the melee. Unfortunately, you can't precision intensify it because we do need 200% strength universally for Curse, but your damage isn't really going to suffer because of that. The Companion is quite important, Diriga with Manifold and Momentous Bond being super broken as a melee primer. These two builds mean that anytime you get near enemies, Diriga will zap them for any statuses modded on your weapon, and also any you gain from Momentous. This is just free damage from Viral that you do literally nothing to maintain, which we always love. Archon shards for both setups are identical, 1 energy shard, 2 casting, and these 2 slots are open for either more melee critical damage from reds or violets, some ability damage shards also working, it is up to you. Now, continuing on all the Quadratic talk from earlier, there is another setup that reaps what I said before about Kullervo being a better sniper frame than Cyto9, cause he is. Snipers in Warframe have a unique shot combo mechanic similar to melee in some ways, where you gain a bonus to their total damage if you successfully hit multiple shots in succession. All snipers have a minimum combo before starting the 1.5 times multiplier, 0.5 damage being added to that value every time the shot combo increases by a number of hits 3 times the amount needed for the previous damage bonus milestone. What Curse does here is take all the multi-shot and punch through hits that you'd normally benefit from and apply it to every enemy linked. This means that our sniper, Coda Sporothrix, can very quickly stack to absolutely insane amounts of sniper combo for some ridiculous damage instances. Sporothrix has many other benefits though. It actually is probably the best sniper in the game, especially for this build. And to explain all of this, I welcome back Professor May? What?
Yes, it's me. Don't ask what happened to the other guy. Sporothrix has an augment, volatile variant that causes the already exploding shots to detonate instantly with a massively increased radius and more status chance, 3 meters of punch through also being added. This is already great, as the high damage snipers do is hitting say 5 enemies, which all explode in a 6 meter radius, which takes advantage of quadratic scaling, and what's even better is that this explosion is made of pure viral, which will get triggered a whole lot because the weapon has very high base status chance. Add in the blast status and our enemy's hit will be procced with blast, causing yet again another explosion. Lastly, throw in Zada's Whisper and the game just breaks. Let me explain. There is an initial damage instance on just these 5 enemies that will be dealt, Zada's replicating it. With a 135% status chance and 3.3 multi-shot, blast is practically guaranteed, which deals its own damage. Zada's, again, that. Now consider the explosion from the sniper hitting enemies around them, including those initial 5 enemies again, Zada replicates that. Blast is likely triggered on them, Zada's replicating again, which means every enemy is hitting each other about 4 times, possibly more. Add in Collective Curse taking every single damage instance I've just mentioned per enemy, and in this case multiplying it by 20. This is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Well, keep an eye out for my next video, guys. Bye!
Well, that was weird. I don't know where she came from. On Sporothrix, typical double galvanized, semi-rifle cannonade being used for even more base damage. We don't need high fire rate due to needing to cast Curse every rotation. Augment obviously, a Bane and Elementalist for the status benefits. Thermite rounds combines with the Progenitor Cold on my sniper for blast. Lastly, target acquired is more headshot damage as a separate multiplier, which we always want. Your arcane choice is split between Merciless and Crux. Merciless changes nothing else on the build, while if you use Crux you gain a lot more status chance and ammo efficiency, but we'll have to change out semi-rifle cannonade for vigilante armaments. It's honestly up to you. The downside of Crux is that you have to hit headshots to maintain it, which can be really difficult sometimes. So again, your choice. Over on Kullervo, since we spam less abilities on the setup and Xadas has a higher base duration, we build pretty differently. Namely, we really push for super high strength to get the Xadas damage replication as close to 100% as possible, but nothing too crazy here. Just make sure you put it over his 4 so you can use Precision Intensify. Companion is far less restrictive here, same as the wider loadout. Use whatever you want. Not gonna forget this time, here's the fashion for this dope ass skin during the outro. That is Kullervo Perfected? Well, is this a perfected? I'm honestly still deciding if I want to call it one, depends on how crazy I go with the edits, so if you clicked on this with that title, well, I hope it was deserving. Definitely not a perfected and definitive guide though, I ain't got time for that after Excalibur, I'm making this video in like 2 days. Hope you enjoyed though, Kullervo, stupid strong, love this frame, see y'all later, peace.